Your book does mention, when it talks about where the American Indians came from, that they might, I'm looking at the top of page 159, says that some of them may have come from Africa or from the South Pacific rather than Asia. Now, the people living here in the South Pacific, folk, this region, they were ocean goers. They had boats, little bitty boats, but it's known that you can survive a big trip across the Pacific in a rowboat. And there have been some people who say that there are places in the ocean where there's fresh water. I don't know how true that is. If you just know where those places are, you can even find fresh water in the ocean. But you can cross the ocean in a rowboat or even a kayak. It has been done. And some of these people might have crossed from here. Africa, again, your book doesn't mention the Olmecs, but there is some evidence the Olmecs came from Africa.
How do you spell that?
O-L-M-E-C. Now these were the Olmec Indians lived right here in what is today Honduras, southern Mexico. Again, I say Honduras. I have no idea how many of you know where I'm talking about. It's in Central America, folk, in the area between North and South America. Now, there's some speculation, when did they come? Now, your book mentions Charles Darwin and said that we believed before Darwin that they'd come from Europe somehow, it might be the Jews. Then came Darwin, and in order for Darwinism to work, you have to have millions of years, folk. It's required. So they wound up, somebody came up with a brilliant idea that the Indians came here 100,000 years ago, but then more recent research has said no, they couldn't have been that far back. More likely, maybe 20,000 years ago. But your authors say they're convinced that the American Indians were here 15,000 years ago, and they were practicing agriculture. And it's believed that farming arose in the New World about the same time it arose in the Middle East. Both sides of the Atlantic learned how to farm. And all right, moving on to the civilizations. Olmec is a land of rubber. They would collect sap from their trees and use it to make rubber. The rubber was used for their ball games, the really hard kind of rubber, and they also used it for their shoes, but they would mix it with some other materials to make the shoes more wearable as well as more durable. The Olmecs had a type of writing that resembles hieroglyphics, the Egyptian writing. Now, I've already mentioned how the Chinese writing, at least to me, resembles hieroglyphics. The Olmec writing resembles hieroglyphics, except for one thing. We don't know, we have not been able to read it. We can't decipher it. In order to decipher ancient writing, you must have a lot of writing. And all we have about Olmec writing is a few stone inscriptions. That's not enough for us to decipher the language. Now, Olmec will remain undeciphered until we make a few more discoveries. And particularly if we find a few more written records buried somewhere or located somewhere we haven't seen. We do know that the Olmecs had a trading network, and they traded, and this is a big part of civilization, folk, trading. They had produced massive stone heads, and some of which are more than 10 feet high. Now, your book does not choose to mention, for some reason, but a lot of the stone heads, they have African features. And I've had more than one African student point this out to me, that the Olmec statues, a lot of them appear to have African features, as well as statues of tigers, which are not found in the New World today, indicate that people who made the statues might have either made them in Africa or somehow come from Africa. Now, about the rubber ball used for the games, I want to state this. All these people living in Central America up until the time of the Europeans played this ball game. We don't know what the rules were, but at the end of the game, the losers were sacrificed. And if you think that gives you incentive to win. Now, when I played high school football, my younger brother said once, hey, high school football is for keeps. That was after we had played a really hard-fought game. Well, you think that's for keeps. This game was really for keeps. The neighbors to the Olmecs, to the west of them, were the Zapotec. Zapotec apparently had a civilization where they had a class of nobles and priests, and the rest of the people were primarily farmers and artisans. They had a written language also that has not yet been deciphered. For some reason, both the Olmec and Zapotec Indians just disappeared, and folk, we do not know why. And this is to be true of a lot of the Indian tribes that built up civilizations throughout North and South America. They had a knack for disappearing and being replaced by peoples who were less civilized or had less on the ball, less wealthy. Again, in the long conflict between the civilized and uncivilized, the uncivilized have a tendency to win. The book goes on to talk about America's first metropolis. They show a picture of it on page 161. This place, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it. But anyway, it appears to have been the capital of a fairly large kingdom. Inside we find a lot of temples, palaces, and indicating that they had a social structure, social hierarchy. About the Olmec, we don't know if they were the only civilization that had most advanced, or if they were just one of many. Your book asks if they were first among equals. In other words, there are a bunch of civilizations right around them, all equal in power and equal in size. Now, apparently, folks, what you have among the American Indians, and this is true of all of them, is the farther back in time you go, you know what I'm about to say? The more advanced they were. And as they get closer and closer to modern times, they tended to decline. This seems to have been a basic feature of all of humanity until about the year 1500. 1500, Europe underwent a Reformation, and the Reformation led to changes in religion and politics and in science that eventually lifted up all mankind. But otherwise, the tendency is to head downhill. And to some extent, I'm not sure that that tendency is still going on. That's a debatable issue. All right. Now, we move on to the Maya. The first time I taught this course back in the year 2000, I asked the class, when does the Mayan calendar end? No one knew. Second year, no one knew. By the third year, a couple of them knew. By the 8th and 9th, by the year 2000, 2009, everybody knew. All right, we know that already. Well, you know, all of you know when the Mayan calendar ended, right? December 21st, 2012. There was a movie made of it. Yeah, what's that?
They didn't consider a leap year then. Mine didn't have a leap year, so technically.
Okay, that was December 22nd and 20th or whatever.
So technically we should have been like 2006, 2007.
Oh, they didn't include any leap years in there. Okay, I was not aware of that. So really it ended. Well, with the Maya, we asked the Maya, what does it mean? And they said, oh, when your calendar ends on December 31st, you just start all over again. So they said, if our people had been around, we just simply start all over again. It means nothing. But anyway, some people said that the Maya said that the world would end in 2012. December 21st, 2012 came and went, and nothing in particular happened. Now, the Mayas tended to live here on the Yucatan Peninsula. The Yucatan is famous, among other things, for being a place where a huge, either asteroid or comet or a very, very large meteorite hit and created what would be a crater on the moon, but is partially submerged under the ocean. But it created a very thick plume of volcanic ash, and this ash wound up spreading all over the globe, and is believed to have been the disaster that killed the dinosaurs. But anyway, the Yucatan Peninsula probably remained uninhabited for some time. Then some people moved in, namely the Maya. And we don't know exactly when. The Maya were notorious for building the world's most massive pyramid. Now, on page 162, your book shows a picture of the pyramid, the Great Pyramid at Giza, and the Mayan pyramid. Now, the pyramid at Giza is taller. The Mayan pyramid, though, is not as tall and more scattered out. The pyramid at Giza, we cannot tell how it was built, folk. It has rocks that are too big to be moved. The Maya was built of earth, so again, all they had to do was put some earth on their backs or in a bucket or container of sort and move it. If you got enough people moving it for enough time, eventually they developed something really large. And folk, the ancient people had some kind of fascination for pyramids, and there have been many a book written as to why. What is their fascination for pyramids? You find them on every continent. And again, your book is going to wind up saying this in connection with some other American stuff, but I'll say it now. Some people believe that they were guideposts or beacons for incoming spacecraft. Others believe there were large electrical capacitors that could supply an unlimited amount of electricity to the community, and better than atomic and cleaner than atomic power. Again, we simply do not know. The Mayans developed a fairly large population fairly fast, and some people believe this contributed to their downfall because it says they developed more people, we got more people, they began to hack away into the rainforest, so it was hack away into the jungle, and by destroying the jungle, they destroyed a big part of their food chain. Again, we simply don't know, but as was the case of all the other Indian people, they endured for a while, grew big and large, and then declined. Now, on a personal note, back in 1976, I happened to visit Central America, and I went to the Mayan city of Copan. One of the chief Mayan cities, and I saw a ball court, and I saw the pyramid, the large pyramid, and saw several other temple structures and some idols. Now, unlike the other Indians, the Maya script has been deciphered. Now, when I was there in 1976, they said we hadn't deciphered it yet. Here's what they told us about the Mayan script. Originally, there were 9 books, sacred books written by the Maya. The Spanish came, and a Spanish priest learned how to read Mayan. And he told his fellow Spaniards what was contained in the books. So the Spanish rose up, destroyed the books, and slaughtered a lot of the Maya, until after a while nobody, not even Maya, could read the text. But we had a lot of them. The 4 of the 9 books were preserved, and in recent times, in 1981, we were able to read the Mayan script. I told myself in 1976, hey, I'm actually seeing this, I'd like to see what it says. But now that I've heard about what it says, I really like this Spanish before me. I really don't care to read it. The Spanish said the Mayan text was the work of Satan. It called for human sacrifice, among other things. They called for the nobility letting blood out of their bodies until their brains did not get enough blood for the brains to function properly, so they start hallucinating. And they believed that what they saw while they were hallucinating was a message from the gods. Many of them died while going through this ceremony. The Mayan were also great astronomers, and assuming, as I'm going to, that they didn't have a telescope, they had a remarkably accurate calendar. And again, with a telescope, folk, you can tell within a few minutes of how long a year is or how long a month is. But without a telescope, you just keep observing year in and year out, and then average it out, and it averages